The night Earth was marked for death arrived without warning, without spectacle and without mercy. No armadas eclipsed the moon, no alien voices thundered from the sky. The Galactic Empire believed subtlety was sufficient for a species as divided and fragile as humanity. Assassins were dispatched instead, engineered, predators trained to erase civilizations quietly, efficiently, and forever. Their targets were not cities or armies, but people, commanders, researchers, strategists, anyone capable of organizing resistance. Humanity was meant to wake leaderless, afraid, and already defeated. Ethan Cole felt the shift before the first report reached Washington. Years of war had taught him to recognize when the world tilted toward violence. He was alone in the high Rockies, lying motionless beneath a dusting of snow, rifle cradled against his shoulder as naturally as a limb. The mountains were silent, yet his instincts screamed that silence had been disturbed. Ethan was a former Marine Scout sniper, pulled from a life of isolation by a recall, order that carried no insignia and no explanations. He did not ask for them. Missions like this never came with comforting answers. The briefing was brief and brutal. Unidentified entities had infiltrated Earth. High-level deaths were escalating. Conventional surveillance showed nothing, but patterns emerged for those trained to look between data points. Ethan was not told he would save the world. He was told he would slow its bleeding. The knowledge settled heavily in his chest, stirring memories of faces he had lost in other wars. He accepted the task not out of patriotism, but because he understood something the enemy did not. Humans fought hardest when there was no applause waiting. Through his scope, the forest appeared unchanged. Yet Ethan noticed what others would miss. Snow bent where no wind touched it. Shadows layered themselves incorrectly. The air itself seemed hesitant. Whatever hunted Earth believed invisibility meant invincibility. Ethan adjusted his breathing, letting the cold sharpen his focus. He had spent years learning to read terrain like a language, and this terrain was whispering danger. Somewhere ahead, an alien assassin moved with absolute confidence, unaware it had already been found. Far above the planet, galactic observers monitored the operation with detached satisfaction. Earth was noisy, divided, predictable. The assassins were succeeding. Each silent kill validated centuries of imperial doctrine. Weaker species collapsed when leadership was removed. Humans would fracture soon. Resistance would be brief, chaotic, and ultimately irrelevant. The Empire's analysts dismissed isolated anomalies as statistical noise, blind to the pattern forming beneath their certainty. Ethan remembered the names of the dead as he waited. A general who had believed diplomacy could save everyone. A scientist who had laughed too loudly and trusted too easily. These were not symbols to him. They were people. The weight of their absence pressed into the snow alongside his body. He felt anger rise, then disciplined it into clarity. Emotion fueled resolve, not recklessness. His finger rested near the trigger, steady, patient, inevitable. The distortion ahead resolved for a fraction of a second, just enough. Ethan exhaled, letting the world narrow to distance, wind, and purpose. The rifle cracked, sharp and final, echoing through the mountains like a declaration. The unseen became visible as alien blood met human snow. Ethan did not watch the body fall. He was already moving, vanishing into the terrain as if he had never existed. In orbit, a single alert blinked red before being dismissed. On Earth, a hunter smiled grimly in the cold. The Empire had sent assassins to end humanity quietly. Humanity had answered with someone who refused to be quiet at all. The second kill confirmed what Ethan already suspected. The enemy was not retreating, it was adapting. The assassin that fell in the desert outside Phoenix moved faster, cloaked more effectively, and carried weapons designed to counter ballistic threats. It did not matter. Ethan learned its rhythm within minutes, predicting movement by absence rather than presence. When the shot landed, the creature's body flickered into existence long enough to remind him this was no drill. The Empire had sent hunters. Humanity had responded with predators of its own. Reports filtered in through channels that officially did not exist. Similar encounters were happening across continents. Small teams, isolated operators, and lone watchers were engaging, targets that governments still refused to name publicly. Fear spread among civilians as unexplained deaths and blackouts mounted. Yet beneath that fear grew something unexpected. Humans were not panicking. They were paying attention. Patterns were being noticed. Warnings were being shared quietly. The species the Empire dismissed as chaotic was synchronizing through instinct. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility deepen with every success. Each kill saved lives, but also drew attention. The assassins began hunting him specifically, probing his methods, testing his reactions. He moved constantly, sleeping in fragments, trusting terrain more than technology. Fatigue crept into his bones, but he welcomed it. Tired meant human. Human meant unpredictable. That was his advantage. The Empire escalated its efforts. Larger units arrived, their presence distorting entire neighborhoods, their strikes growing bolder. Ethan was deployed closer to population centers, where a single mistake meant collateral damage he would never forgive himself for. During one operation near a temporary shelter, he watched an assassin pause, studying terrified civilians with cold curiosity. For the first time, Ethan felt something crack. This enemy did not just kill efficiently, it killed without meaning. The shot he took was reckless by his standards, fired sooner than ideal, but it was true. The assassin collapsed mid-motion, energy weapon clattering uselessly across concrete. The people screamed, then stared, then ran. Ethan did not follow. He remained still, shaking slightly, forcing his breathing under control. He was not invincible. He was one man standing against a galaxy that had decided Earth was expendable. Above the planet, alarm replaced arrogance. Data streams no longer aligned with projections. Assassin loss rates climbed. Human response times shortened. The Empire's commanders argued, reassessed, and finally authorized. Deployment of a command level, Hunter designed to eliminate the source of resistance coordination. It was faster, smarter, and cruelly adaptive. It was sent not to kill randomly, but to break morale by destroying hope itself. Ethan sensed the change before confirmation arrived. The air felt heavier. His movements were anticipated. Traps failed. The hunter learned him the way he had learned others. Their first direct encounter was brief and violent, ending with Ethan wounded and barely escaping into terrain that no longer felt friendly. For the first time since the invasion began, doubt crept in. Not fear of death, but fear of failure. As he treated his wounds alone, Ethan confronted the truth he had avoided. He could not win this forever. He could only buy time. And sometimes buying time was enough. He sent everything he had learned. Every weakness observed, every pattern mapped. To the others still fighting. If he fell, the knowledge would remain. When night returned, Ethan rose despite the pain, rifle steady through sheer will. The command assassin was still out there, closing in, confident that inevitability was on its side. Ethan allowed himself one quiet breath, not of hope, but of acceptance. Tomorrow would decide more than his life. It would decide whether humanity was prey or something far more dangerous. Dawn arrived thin and colorless, bleeding slowly over the mountains, as if the world itself hesitated to witness what came next. Ethan moved through the rocks with practiced restraint, every step measured against pain that flared with each breath. The command assassin was close now. He could feel it in the way the silence pressed inward, no longer empty but watching. This enemy was not rushing. It was savoring inevitability, convinced that experience and adaptation would triumph over a single exhausted human. They met in a narrow pass where retreat was impossible and terrain offered no mercy. The assassin emerged fully visible at last, its form towering and deliberate, eyes reflecting data and disdain in equal measure. It spoke, translating effortlessly, informing Ethan that resistance had been calculated, measured, and found insufficient. Humanity, it claimed, survived only because the Empire had allowed it to survive. Ethan listened without interrupting, studying posture, balance, the faint delay between movement and intention. Arrogance, he knew, was universal. The first exchange was brutal and fast. Energy tore stone apart where Ethan had been a heartbeat earlier. His return fire shattered shielding, but failed to stop the advance. The assassin closed distance with terrifying speed, forcing Ethan into close quarters where marksmanship yielded to instinct. They collided hard, the rifle torn from his grasp, breath knocked from his lungs. For a moment, the world narrowed to pain, frost, and the weight of something far stronger pinning him down. The assassin raised its weapon, confident, final. Ethan met its gaze and saw no hatred there, only certainty. That, more than anything, made him smile. Humans had learned long ago that certainty was a weakness. With shaking hands, he triggered the contingency he had prepared hours earlier, not in desperation but in clarity. A final round fired from a secondary angle, one the assassin had deemed statistically irrelevant. It punched through the unseen gap where efficiency had replaced caution. The creature froze, its calculations collapsing into error. It staggered back, confusion flickering across features never meant to show doubt. Ethan did not waste the moment. He surged forward, reclaiming his rifle, and ended the fight with a shot placed not in anger but in understanding. The assassin fell, lifeless, its presence dissolving into nothing more than cooling air and silence. Ethan stood alone, swaying, the weight of exhaustion finally catching up. He felt no triumph, only relief sharp enough to hurt. Somewhere beyond the atmosphere, alarms would be sounding. The Empire would be reassessing, retreating, reconsidering a world that had refused to die quietly. He sank to one knee, steadying himself against the rock, and allowed the moment to pass. Across Earth, the pressure eased. Assassin activity dropped sharply, then ceased altogether. Government scrambled to regain footing, to explain what could be explained and bury what could not. The truth spread anyway, not as panic, but as resolve. Humanity had been tested in silence and answered in kind. The knowledge Ethan had shared ensured others could continue the fight if it returned. Officially, Ethan Cole never existed. His records vanished, his name erased from briefings and databases. Unofficially, he became something quieter and stronger than a legend. A reminder passed in training rooms and late-night conversations of a man who had stood alone and held the line when the universe blinked first. Weeks later, as the world slowly healed, Ethan watched the sky from a remote ridge, scars knitting beneath worn fabric. He did not know if the Empire would return. He only knew that if it did, humanity would be ready. Not because of weapons or numbers, but because it had remembered who it was when extinction came whispering. The stars shone no differently, but Ethan understood now that they were watching more carefully. He turned away, disappearing once again into the vast, patient land. The story was over for today, but its meaning was not. Somewhere someone would listen, learn, and stand. And that, he believed, would always be enough.